Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're going to wait 1 minute, let folks trickle in, and then we will get started. So once again, for those trickling in, we're just going to wait a few minutes and let everyone join us, and then we will get started. So we'll be starting in about 1 minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. And this is the Optimizing Build Time and Getting Results Using Test Splitting webinar. We're very excited to have you with us today. My name's Tanner, and with me is Catherine. Today we'll be discussing test splitting on CircleCI. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them in the chat or at the end of the session. So like I said, my name is Tanner. I'm an internal technical trainer here at CircleCI, but I'm lucky enough to get to join you all for this external webinar and talk with you as our customers. And also with me is Catherine Pope, another technical trainer here. She'll be in the background monitoring the Q&A chat and facilitating discussion at the end of the webinar. So we also have some of our DevOps customer engineers on the call to help answer questions as well. So we've got Nick and Ahmed in the background. All right. So before we jump into the agenda and objectives and all that fun stuff, I really want to answer this question up front. Why are we talking about test splitting today? So as developers, engineers, and DevOps folks, we want to ensure that our code is tested thoroughly, and sometimes our test suites can take a really long time to run in our CircleCI pipeline or in our CI/CD pipeline. So I've got a customer example on the screen here. This is a testing job. And as you can see, it ran for 7 minutes and 28 seconds, which is a fast job runtime, especially considering the amount of tests that were run here. So on my screen, I can see that they ran 38,000 tests, which is, a lot of tests. So they're currently, however, running across 40 executors. So this job is what we would call parallel. They're running in parallel. So in other words, there are 40 machines that are working on this job. And this customer has implemented test splitting to distribute their tests across these 40 machines. Now, if this customer was not using parallelism and test splitting, this job would be at a runtime of about 3 hours. So if we were just to add up across these 40 different nodes or machines, just the testing runtime, that would be over 3 hours. So test splitting is an amazing feature that helps you cut down on your build times. And so that's why we want to talk about it today. But this is a really massive topic. There's lots we could discuss. So I want to make sure we're focused in this webinar and highlight a few things that we're not covering. So we're not going to talk about using environment variables to split tests. So what I mean here is we're not going to use CircleCI environment variables that you can save to split your tests. There are a few things you can do there, but that's kind of a bigger topic. We also won't be talking about the third-party tools to split tests. So this could include Knapsack Pro, for example. And then last, I just want to point out one more, and that's test splitting with self-hosted runners. So this is a relatively new feature. It's fantastic for those that are using a self-hosted runner on your infrastructure. You can definitely test or split your tests when doing that, but that's a bigger topic. We want to just stay focused here. So what are we going to talk about today? So let's look at our agenda. So we're going to look at how test splitting works and what types of test splitting there are. So this is just a general overview. And then we'll talk about implementing test splitting on an actual application. So this is a demo app that we've built, and we'll implement test splitting by timing. And then we'll look at the benefits of that test splitting on our demo application. and review our test insights. And then last, we've got time for a quick activity and some questions that we can hopefully answer for you. And our learning objectives for today is hopefully by the end of the webinar, you'll be able to understand the steps to split tests on CircleCI, understand the different options that you have when splitting tests, so splitting by timing, for example, or by file name. And then hopefully you'll be able to implement any necessary changes to your configuration file to implement test splitting in your pipeline. And then last, understand some of the benefits and application of test insights on CircleCI. So with those learning objectives in mind, let's jump right into it. And let's start by discussing our first topic, which is how does test splitting work? So first, I just want to highlight a few of our supported frameworks when you're testing. I know there's lots and lots of different frameworks for testing, but I want to point out a few here. So the first one is going to be Jest, and we'll actually be using Jest with our example today. Another is PyTest, and then Maven and Gradle. These are just some of the few of the many test suites that you can use to test split on CircleCI. So what does it take to actually split your tests on your pipeline and on your specific job? So there are 3 steps we're going to highlight today. And the first is to set a parallelism level. This simply means determining how many machines or executors we want to distribute our tests across. So in that customer build I showed you at the beginning, they had 40 individual machines, which we'll also refer to as nodes in this webinar. So they had 40 nodes running their tests. So this means in their configuration file, they set a parallelism level of 40. Now this could be 4 machines or it could be 45. It's up to the user to determine that level. So then the second step is once we've determined the level of parallelism or how many machines, we then use the CircleCI CLI command to define our test splitting. So we've said how many machines we want. Now we need to tell CircleCI what tests and how we want them to split. So that's done using the command line. And then lastly, we'll be talking about storing test results. So that will give us access to test insights, which can highlight for us flaky tests. So tests that are failing non-deterministically, which is a great benefit. Storing our test results also allows us to split our tests by timing information. So we can look at the runtime of each of our tests, and then CircleCI will distribute those intelligently across our parallel nodes. So it takes that information into account so that they hopefully can finish all around the same time. So let's review that first step in setting up test splitting, which is setting a parallelism level. So this is done by simply adding the parallelism key to your configuration file under the job that you want to parallelize. So in the screenshot on the left here, we've added a parallelism level of 5, and we added that to a job here called build and test. So when this job runs, you'll see we're using the Docker CircleCI convenience node image. We'll spin up 5 of those containers for our job to run on. So in the CircleCI UI, if I was to go click on the specific job in my workflow, in the UI, I would see a parallel runs number here, and we can see 5, and then they're numbered 0 to 4. So I've got 5 of these nodes running. To help illustrate this principle just a little bit more, I've got this graphic here on the screen. So on the left is an example of a job with 7 tests with no parallelism configured. Or in other words, there's a parallelism level of 1, like you can see there. So there's only 1 machine running all 7 of the tests. And that's going to take a lot of time to run through all of these since it's just 1 node doing all of the hard work. So to contrast that, if we look on the right side of this screen, we've got a test job that's running parallelism of a level of 4. So you can see it's the same job, but those same 7 tests, they're being distributed across each of these executors. And in this example, we're using test split by, and we're saying either by file name or class name. So CircleCI is just going to look at your list of tests and distribute them evenly across the amount of nodes that you've just spun up with your job. And it will do that by alphabetical order. So we see, 2 jobs on the first 3 executors and then 1 on that 4th. And that's, like I said, done alphabetically. All right, so once we've determined the level of parallelism, we use the CircleCI CLI in the configuration file to define the test splitting. So in that last screenshot, we said, okay, we've got 5 parallel nodes running. Now I want to tell you what tests to distribute across these and how. So this CircleCI command line command consists of 2 steps, really. And the first step is to provide CircleCI with a list of tests by class name or by file name, and then determining the method of splitting. So we'll go over this command in a little more detail in a moment, but I just want to point out, we can see the first half CircleCI test glob, and then we give a list of our tests and we provide that to the test splitting command, CircleCI test split, and then we say split by timings. But we'll go over this in more detail as the webinar continues here. One quick note though, the CircleCI test commands in the CircleCI command line interface of glob and split, they can't be run locally. So if you have the command line installed locally, you can't run these as they require information that only exists inside a CircleCI container. All right, so let's look at the first half of this command. So CircleCI is going to expect a list of class names or file names, like I mentioned. So what you'd want to do is provide these, and there's a few different ways you can do that. So you can provide these by a text file with your file names or class names, so pointing to a certain text file with those file names and class names, or you can provide a direct path to your test files, or as you can see in this screenshot, we can pipe a glob of test files. And that's what we're going to do for our example today, is we'll be using this globbing method. So essentially what we're doing here is we're just saying that all the files inside my source directory under my tests folder, all my files that end in the .js extension, these are the files that are my tests and that I want you to split. The asterisk .js is just saying any name and then the extension .js. So like I said, this screenshot's similar to what we're going to be doing today. And that's because we're using Jest as a test runner, and Jest doesn't accept a list of test files or class names. Essentially, it requires specific file patterns. So we're going to glob and match those file patterns and pipe those to our CircleCI test split command. All right, so the second half of this is to actually then say, how are we going to split these? So you can see on the screen, we're using the CircleCI test split command, and then we've got the split by and then equal. So we're saying split by timings. So we're going to review going over splitting by timing in our demo application. But last, I would just want to point out the last 2 things on this command here that we have. So we've got an echo of this test variable. So I put my CircleCI commands into a shell variable called test, and then I'm using echo test to simply print out the results of my commands here. So I can see if I'm globbing the correct testing files. So when I run this job inside my CircleCI UI, I'll be able to look at the output and see if I had the correct tests provided. And then last, we run this command that we saved by using yarn test and giving the name of this shell variable, and that will allow me to run those tests that CircleCI has split for me. And then the last step here is to store our test results. So all we need to do here is to add the store test results command to our configuration. So on the right-hand side, you can see I'm using the store test results key in my configuration file and providing a path to the directory I have here of JUnit, which holds my XML compatible test results. So this will give me access to test insights, which that screenshot on the bottom there is an image of. It'll give me information on my tests, how many I'm running, flaky tests, test failures, my slowest tests, and give me that insight I need to go back and improve my tests. This also allows me to then take this timing data and, like I've mentioned, split it intelligently across my nodes. And we'll review that in just a moment. And once again, I want to highlight the flaky tests feature that Test Insights gives you. So this allows you to identify your tests that have flaked, or in other words, passed and failed when nothing has changed to that piece. So, all right, we've talked about these 3 points, or these 3 steps. We've got setting up a parallelism level, using the command line to define our test splitting, and then storing our results so that we can see our insights and we can then test split by timing. So let's actually apply this in an example on CircleCI and with a demo app. And we've built a really, really simple React app to do that. So just to highlight or showcase what we're showing you today, we've built a simple React app and we've built it off the Jumpstart template of Create React app. And what our app holds is really, really simple, just mathematical equations. So just add, multiply, subtract, divide, just really, really simple functions. And then we have several unit tests on these functions. So as you can see in the screen on the right, describe addition testing. Excuse me, we've got 2 + 2 = 4. We just expect that to be 4. So once again, just really, really simple tests. So I do want to show you really quickly what our demo application looks like in what this repo holds. So I'm going to open up my source folder here. And you can see I've got my tests, all my different app pieces. So here those functions will be testing, no big deal. And then if I open up my test directory, you can see I've got a long list of test files that are just testing each of these different pieces of my really simple application. So if I open this up, you can see once again, just lots of addition that we're testing. I do want to point something out in this file here, and that's I've baked in a little sheet here to help us illustrate something. So this test is going to last for 20 seconds. And I've done this so that I can illustrate that file size does not always equal test runtime. So we'll be able to see the results when CircleCI looks at file size versus timing and distributes these tests accordingly. One last little piece here with our application. In our package.json file, we've added a reporter to our jest config, and that's the jest JUnit. And that's simply so we can have our XML test results and we can get the timing data, we can get the insights that we're looking for. So that's our app as it stands. Let's take a look at our CircleCI pipeline and our configuration file just to see where we're at. So if I open up my configuration file here, you can see it's a really, really simple configuration. We've got in here just one job, and that's our build and test job, similar to the screenshots we've seen here. And we've got just this one job in our workflow of that same name. So here I'm using the Docker node convenience image. And really the main goal of this job here is to just run all of those tests that I showed you previously. So we're using yarn tests to run all of those. I also want to point out in this configuration file, I've added the node orb, and I'm using the node install packages command, and this is going to install my packages and cache them for me. So this orb helps keep my config really short. So we're at 22 lines. If I look at the compiled, or in other words, what are we seeing without this orb? You can see it's a lot longer and there's a lot more busyness here. So my orb helps me clean this up. So I'm on the CircleCI developer page and I want to show you my orb. So I'm going to open up the documentation for the node orb and show you the command I'm using. So this is install your node packages and automate the caching. So this will cache my node packages. So that'll help trim down my time as well. All right, so this is our application as it stands. Let's go look at what this ran like in CircleCI. So without test splitting, I've done a couple of runs here just of my workflow build and test that we just saw. And there's no test splitting going on. So Currently, I'm at around almost 2 minutes. In the real world, this is super fast, but for our demonstration purposes, we want to cut this down. It's too long for us. So let's go look at what this is currently doing. So if I open up my build and test job, 1 minute, 43 seconds, we've got the spin up environment. Let's go look at my tests. So you can see in my test results here, I ran every single one of my test files all in this one machine. And it's not quite where I want it to be. So let's start applying some test splitting here. So I mentioned there's lots of different types to split your tests. Let's actually look at some of these and apply them to our application. So first, the available splitting types. You can split by file size. So looking at the size of the file, CircleCI will distribute across your nodes based on those sizes. File name, which we've seen, just is going to take a list of your files and evenly distribute them across your nodes. And then last is splitting by timing. So let's apply these to our application. So first, file name. This is the default method of test splitting. So let's look at my command here that I've added. So I'm still providing a list of tests, and that's my globbing piece here. So I have CircleCI test glob, and then I'm pointing to my test files. And then I see CircleCI test split, but in this case, I did not add any split by command. And so CircleCI will default back to splitting by their name in this case. And that, once again, will be done alphabetically. So if we look at the results in the CircleCI UI, we can see that even though we're not splitting very intelligently, we're just giving a list of files, we were able to cut the runtime down dramatically. We went from almost 2 minutes to just under 1 minute. So that just took our list of tests and split them across my 5 nodes. The next way, like I mentioned, is splitting by file size. So once again, I still provided my list of tests here on the first half of my command. Then in the second, I said split by file size. So we're going to look, CircleCI is going to look at the list of your files and their size, and then distribute those across your nodes so that each node is kind of handling the same amount of information. So we can see there was some slight improvement here, but this is still not the most efficient way in our case to distribute tests. So our files are all relatively close in size, even though the actual test runtime varies quite a bit by file. So if you remember, I added the test that lasts for 20 seconds. So it's going to slow down one of our files, but the size is pretty much the same as the others. So we're still not getting the most efficient splitting here. So in other words, file size is not always the best for determining the runtime of the tests. All right, so let's actually implement this into our demo application, and let's split by timing. So I'm going to open up my configuration file here. Once again, you've seen a screenshot of this previously. We've got our build and test job running on our convenience node image here. Resource class size is small. I want to add in that parallelism number first. So I want to tell CircleCI how many machines I want to split my tests across. So I'm going to do that here just under my resource class size on my build and test job. So I'll add a parallelism level of 5 to start. I've got that there. Now I need to tell CircleCI what tests and how to split them. So that's done once again with the CircleCI command. So I'm going to add here to my test application step, I'm going to add in a shell variable, like we've seen, to hold my CircleCI test splitting commands. So my first step here is to provide that list. So I'm going to say CircleCI and then tests. And then I'm going to use the globbing method, once again, since we're using Jest, to provide a pattern of files for CircleCI to split for me. And those are inside my source directory under my test folder. And then I'm going to use the asterisk, which is part of the globbing method, to say any name of any file here that ends in .js. And then I will pipe those results over to my CircleCI split command. So next, CircleCI, and then test split. And now I'm going to indicate by timing. So I want CircleCI to split these based off their runtime. So I'm going to say split by timings. And then I'm going to make sure that I have yarn test and actually execute these tests. So I'm going to add my variable here. So add the test. Excellent. So those are the first two steps. I've got my nodes. I've got my command line here. Now I want to store these results. So on subsequent runs, I can use my timing data. So what I need to do here is just create a quick directory so I can store my files. So I'm going to type run and then make directory. And I'm just going to create a temporary folder here called JUnit. So this will hold my test results. Because once again, we added the JUnit reporter. And then I'm going to move my test results from these tests into this temporary folder here. So I'm just going to add a quick command. We'll say run command, and then we will say copy my JUnit.xml files and bring them into my JUnit directory. And that way I can save them. I'm going to add some logic here just so that no matter what, my JUnit XML files will get stored. So I had to win and always. And then I will add my store test results command. So here I just need to point to my path that where my test results are living, and that's my JUnit directory. All right, and that's all I need to do. So I should be able to test split by timing now. So let's go take a look at our first run and see what happened. All right, so I'm just in my CircleCI UI here. I've got my first run of build and test with the splitting by timing. However, if you look at the duration at 1 minute 39 seconds, that's quite a bit slower than what I was expecting. So let's look in and try to figure out why. So I can see I've got my tests and I've got my nodes, all 5 here. If I scroll down, you can see that I did have to install my yarn packages, so that took some time. But let's look at our test splits here. And I get this error message saying error reading historical timing data file does not exist. And that's simply because this was the first time that we ran our job with the test results being stored. So CircleCI has no information. So it's going to default back to splitting by file name. And once again, that's just distributed evenly. So I think I've got 5 tests here. And then if I look at my other nodes, yep, once again, 5, just splitting by the name. And that's it. I think on this last one, we should have 4. Perfect. Yep. So just defaulting back to file name. I want to run this again and see if we can implement that timing data. So on a subsequent run, if I open this up and take a look, got my build and test job, and we're running at 46 seconds. So this is the fastest we've been able to get these tests to run. And that's because now CircleCI has both our packages installed and our timing data to split these more intelligently across all of my nodes. So if I scroll down, yep, there you can see I restored the cache, so I didn't have to install any packages. And my testing application did split by timing. So on this node, we only have 1 test file running since CircleCI realized it takes a long time. The other nodes can handle the rest of the job. So if I look at another node, you can see this one ran 6, and I've got my auto detected file name timing. So that's telling me CircleCI has the timing information. So I was able to distribute these evenly across my different nodes. So that might bring up a question on optimizing your test splitting. So what do we do from here? So unfortunately, there is no magic parallelism level that will solve everyone's problems because test suites are different, file sizes are different. So it really becomes a balance between your resource class size, your parallelism level, and your test suite size. So resource class size, we're just really talking about, small, medium, large, extra large of your resource. In our example, we were using Docker small, so we just have a limited amount of CPU and RAM on that machine. So I could increase that, and that may help speed up the runtime as well. I will point out though, with the parallelism level, in our example, we do have that one test file that's running for 20 seconds. So there becomes a point where no matter how many nodes we run, all our other nodes can be running those fast tests, but we'll still have to wait for that 20 seconds on the other node that's handling the longer test. So it becomes a balance between finding the right number. Luckily, there's some tools to help you with that. We've got our resources tab in the UI that will help you see how much CPU and RAM you're using. And this is available for all of our executors, say Windows, so Mac OS, Docker machine, you can see your resource usage. And then in our insights, we also have some tools that will help you determine your parallelism level. Well, let's take a look at an example of me trying to tweak with this on this application. So here I've ran a job with a parallelism level of 8. So we've got 8 nodes that have split all of our timing. And once again, we're splitting by timing here. So 44 seconds is a little bit quicker, not by too much. Let's go ahead and look at all of these nodes. So I do want to point out as well that each of these nodes has to run these initial steps. So each node, because it's a separate environment, has to download previous test results, restore a cache, and really prepare the environment. So those timings are on each of these nodes. So I do want to make you aware of that as well. So yeah, once again, those ran on all of these and we got 44 seconds. If I look at a different example where I have a parallelism level of 3, we ran for 48 seconds, which is a little slower, but really not by much. So let's look here at some of our tests. So here's our testing application step. Once again, this one node ran our one job that runs for 20 seconds, and these other 2 nodes handled the rest of the tests. So it becomes a balance of your testing runtime and splitting across those nodes. So you can see this one ran quite a few, but we were still able to run pretty quickly. All right, so I also want to point out the resources tab that I mentioned. This will allow you to see your CPU and RAM usage. So in my case, I'm using Docker Small and I'm maxing out the CPU at a few points. So there is some potential to gain some speed by increasing this to say Docker Medium or even larger, just depending on my tests and their runtime. Excellent. So now let's talk about some of the benefits and look at our test insights here. So I'm going to open up a customer's test insight. So this is just in the CircleCI UI under Insights, and I've gone over to the testing tab. Once again, they can only see this if they're storing their test results in their configuration file. So these are going to be calculated off the 100 most recent workflow runs. And I can see here an average test per run. So I'm saying each run usually goes about 5,000 tests. I've got some flaky tests, so some tests that are failing non-deterministically. I may want to go take a look at those. And I've got test failures and slowest test. So I can highlight and try to optimize my tests here. Next is this feature I kind of mentioned. This is a parallelism and test splitting kind of helper. It'll take a look at your jobs and their testing times and give you a quick estimate based on a number of parallels. So in this example, 4 and whatnot, it'll help you kind of determine what you can do here. Then we've got a number of tests, so we can go look at the 100 most recent workflow runs. If there's some kind of issue, I can click on this and be directed to my workflow where there was these tests. All right, next, flaky tests. This is a really big one that I had talked about. So tests in this table have both passed and failed on the same commit. So they're flaking, right? There's something going on that's causing me to fail. This can slow me down. It can cause problems. So I can then go look at the name of the test and try to identify maybe there's some kind of issue here. It'll also give me the class name so I can easily identify the test. Then I'll get a list of the most failed tests. So if there's a couple tests that are really having a problem, I can focus in on those. And also look at slow tests. Maybe I want to optimize a few tests, go back and check. So I'll get a list of all of those tests that I'm storing data for. So I can also change workflow and switch on the branch as well. All right, so that's our testing insights. So we're going through all this information really quickly, and there's just so much we could talk about. And we don't have time in our webinar to get into all of these different aspects. So I want to point you to some more information on test splitting. So we've got our documentation, which has fantastic written up examples and troubleshooting and a tutorial and some blogs. So I've listed those here so that you can go check out, different tools for your testing frameworks and whatnot. Then we've also provided some other resources. There's the globster.xyz tool, which is a really helpful little website that'll help you practice your globbing. So making sure you get the right files to the test runner. And then a few customer examples of them using test splitting and how they were able to then, improve on their build times. All right, so we're going to kind of transition into a wrap up. We'll have a quick link to a survey, but don't go anywhere. We're going to be doing a quick activity and answer any questions that have been left over. So we always want to improve what we're doing and make sure we give you the most important information that you need or that you're interested in. So there's going to be a link posted in the chat. And this survey, it's like 3 questions. It should only take a minute or 2. So if you would please fill out the survey, that would be really helpful. The link will also be emailed to you after the webinar as well. So give a second for that to be posted. All right, so make sure you fill out the survey. We greatly appreciate it. So we're going to transition now to a quick little activity, sharing what you learned. So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat a few of these, but I'm going to hand this over to Catherine to talk about any questions and examples you want to share.
Thanks so much, Tanner. That's a great job. Yeah, so we'd love to hear from you what you've learned from this webinar. What are you going to implement immediately? Can you share any examples of where you plan to use test splitting? And also, if you've got any questions at all, please put them in the chat box and one of us will pounce on them. And even if there's something that was previously mysterious about test splitting and you've reached enlightenment today, we'd love to know about that too. It's a complicated area, but I think Tanner just gave a really clear explanation. Okay, I'm not getting anything in the chat box so far. Perhaps everyone's still digesting test splitting and those examples. But of course, you're very welcome to contact us afterwards. There'll be a recording of this webinar available. If you want to go back over it again, you'll get the link to that automatically. Okay, there's nothing popping up for me. Oh, hang on. Somebody has said that chat is disabled. Don't think I've got any control over that. Okay. Some questions popping up now in the Q&A box. Okay, so we've got a question here on, are there any plans to support test frameworks like NUnit, where the test cases are not separated by files? Perhaps Nick or Ahmed could jump in on that one.
Yeah, so there's no plans at the moment. We had a feature request for that that has subsequently been closed, but there are ways to set up NUnit tests within CircleCI still. It just takes a little bit more manual work.
Thank you, Nick. Any other questions? If you could pop them in the Q&A panel. Okay, looks like everything is resolved there. As I said, please, you're very welcome to ask us questions afterwards. And if there's nothing else, I will say thank you very much to Tanner for doing a great job, and a big thank you to all of you for coming along to today's webinar, and wishing you the best of luck with your test splitting adventures. Bye for now.